All right, good evening, everybody. Hello, welcome. Welcome to the first Town of Norwood information session for the May 2025 town meeting, annual town meeting and special town meetings that we're going to be having. I'm Michael Rosen. I'm the Assistant General Manager for the Town of Norwood, and I appreciate you all being here. This is the first night of 3 nights that we're going to be having this week related to our upcoming May 12th town meeting. Just a couple of things. First thing you'll notice is I'm actually using a microphone today. Last year, those of you who were here, I know several new members, but we didn't have microphones in this room, so we wanted to say thank you to the Norwood School Department for helping us out, putting this together with the microphones, and we're also using the OWL camera so that people at home can be watching along. Everybody at home should be able to see the slides behind me, as well as a little snapshot of myself talking or the audience. I know it's a little hard to see, but mainly you're here to see the slides and not my face. So, a couple other things, Jeff. I'm going to just advance to the next slide, and then you can take it from there. This is the lineup for this week. We do tonight's information session is going to cover the basics of municipal finance, led by our very capable finance director, Jeffrey O'Neill, who's been with us just over a year now, and thank you for doing that today. And then we're going to turn into the budget overview for all of the government, general government town departments, and then we're going to hand it off to the school departments to take over from there and go over their budget. So that's the batting order for tonight. And as has been practiced at these information sessions in the past, we prefer if you have questions on a specific slide or a line item, we'd like you to just raise your hand. If you're at home, please either raise your Zoom hand. That's usually the best way to do it. There's a little hand icon at the bottom there that you can raise. I'll be keeping an eye on the laptop, and then also obviously we'll see who's in the room raising their hand, and we'd rather just get to the questions as they come up rather than wait till the end. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff O'Neill, who is going to take it from there with the slideshow, and thanks again for being here, everybody.
All right, thank you, Mike. Is it on? Yep, should be on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Again, as Mike mentioned, my name is Jeff O'Neill, Director of Finance, Town Accountant for the town. I've been here just over a year. Prior to that, I was 7 years down in the town of Vernon, Connecticut.
The mic's not on.
Can you put it closer to you, Jeff? Gotta hold it. Okay. Let's want to use that one. Okay. This is fine. So again, prior to Norwood, as town of Vernon, Connecticut, Finance Director and Treasurer for 7 years. A number of years in the investment industry before that, and I've also spent 14 years on the town of Medway, where I live, on the finance committee there. So I've had a number of years and a lot of hours spent developing, analyzing, and presenting budgets. So I hope we can keep going here, and I'm happy to be in Norwood. So tonight we're going to start off with the basics of municipal finance, and then we're going to get into the operating budget. We'll kind of go pretty quickly. I know there's some new town meeting members. So as Mike said, please stop me as we go along if you have any questions, any queries, or we can answer as we go along to make this as interactive as possible. So what does the budget? What does the budget represent? So the budget that we put together is a clear statement of community priorities showing how and where public funds are allocated. It represents a snapshot in time. Again, it's our best estimate of what things are going to cost in the upcoming year. Includes departmental operating budgets, shared municipal expenses. Reflects, as we'll go through, reflects a largely fixed cost structure. You're going to see most of our costs are involved in labor, personnel. And those changes are made incrementally each year. And then lastly, and again, this is more for the accounting, but it serves as an official financial record. It's used for accounting, compliance, transparency, reporting to the state, reporting for audits, and all the other stuff that comes with financial reporting. So if you look at the budget book, and again, so the budget books, we do have some up here. They're in the town clerk's office. The budget is also posted online in the town meeting notices and documents, and the Finance Commission website and the town meeting documents. So this is what you'll see when you start looking through the departments. Town of Norwood does a good job in terms of breaking it up. So if we look here, it's general government. We have our town clerk. We just chose to pick that one because they're so excellent. We have the salaries, and then we have our operating expenses. So this is where the line items are. What we'll go through tonight is more of a summary based, but if you look at the budget book, This is going to be where all the details are and what the expenses are, and we use the request and then the prior 4 years. So it's a 5-year look on the budget. So we'll go through a couple of definitions and some of the terminology that's used in municipal finance. So what is a stabilization fund? This is the town's primary reserve account, which is often compared to a savings account. It's intended for emergencies and long-term needs and plays a key role in supporting the town's credit rating. Right now, we are AA+. That is one notch below AAA. It's a very solid financial rating, low risk. The best practice for your stabilization fund, maintain a balance equal to 5 to 10% of general fund expenditures. Looking at the upcoming year, we're at about 7% with a $12 million stabilization balance. So we are in good shape there as well. But it's important to keep contributing to that annually if we can, because obviously expenses are going to be increasing. Funds from this account can be appropriated for any lawful purpose by 2/3 vote of the town meeting. But again, it's not an account you really want to dip into. Mostly what you want to do in terms of, I say common uses, but it's really, this use is for emergency really only in terms of covering unexpected expenses, major equipment failures, storm damage, addressing revenue shortfalls, reductions in state aid, economic downturns, something that we're looking at right now, but again, we don't think we're going to need to dip into this. So I think there's a lot of talk out there, but again, there's no inclination right now that we have to dip into this fund for any purposes. And then last is funding unplanned capital needs or urgent repairs. Again, we have an aging infrastructure in town, so that could be something that does come into play. Again, don't anticipate that. Another term that's thrown around and it's talked about a lot in this budget is free cash. What is free cash? So that's a surplus of revenue or unspent budget funds. That is certified at the end of the fiscal year by Massachusetts Department of Revenue. Until that's certified, we really don't bring that number publicly. Again, the town of Norwood has been very fortunate over the last couple of years. They've had a large amount of free cash. Last year it was $29 million. Again, that sounds like a lot. It is a lot, but it was mainly made up of building permits and investment revenue, which was, again, not budgeted because we didn't know where the Federal Reserve was going to be on interest rates. You're always going to be conservative on that. So the fact that they did not change interest rates, earned 4% on some of our savings, that was a good thing to have. Again, so free cash in general, it's a one-time revenue source. It should not be used to support the operating budget or for ongoing expenses. That being said, when used strategically, free cash can, again, buy time to stabilize the budget, but more importantly for what we're looking at going forward, minimize community impact.
The other way.
Yeah, I'm left-handed, so this is a. And then, so minimize community impact and maintain continuity in service delivery and workforce. Yes,
What happens to free cash if it's not used?
it rolls over to next year. Again,
As free cash?
correct.
Okay.
So again, we'll use, in Norwood, we use some the 29 million was certified. In the fall town meeting, we used some for capital and to address some of our reserves. So we used about 9 million, so right now we're looking at about $20 million of unused free cash, which we'll get into in a minute.
The interest from that account stays in that account?
In the free cash?
In
the stabilization fund, the interest stays there, yes.
Interest stays there.
Yeah, so that money earns interest, stays in that fund, can't be used for general fund operating purposes.
All right, so the free cash goes into the general?
So the free cash is basically in our bank account, yes, that money is investment revenue, that's a line item in our revenue on the budget.
Can I ask you something?
Yes,
If you guys keep using free cash to balance the budget, does that impact our rating?
You might want to repeat the question just for the people at home.
yeah, so for people at home, the question is if we continue to use free cash to fund the operating budget, will that impact our bond rating? So there's a couple of answers to that. The general answer is long-term use, yes. Short-term, no, because we are developing a plan to address our future budget shortfalls. So in this year, yes, we are using a large amount of free cash. It makes sense, as I mentioned before, it's minimizing community impact, maintaining continuity and service. Again, if we do it next year, we'll have to have an explanation, but there's planning on going forward to figure out what we want to do and how we'll address that going forward. Any other questions on free cash? Yes.
Does excess revenue from like the light department, does that turn into free cash or does that stay in the light department?
No, so the light department, yes, so we'll get into that in a second. So the light department, broadband, that's all Norwood Light. The water sewer, that's an enterprise fund, that stays in that fund. So again, we'll kind of go through a couple definitions of how to calculate and then threats to free cash. So calculating free cash, as we kind of just mentioned, surplus revenue. So revenue collections in excess of estimated revenues. And again, the town is always encouraged to budget revenues conservatively. We don't want to say, okay, we're going to have $100 million in revenues. If anything changes and we only collect 95, that's some financial trouble that the bond rating agencies will certainly look at, because they look at your budgeting ability and have you offered an operating surplus over the past few years. Budget turnbacks, again, on the unexpended appropriations, we'll get into an example of that in the next slide. Prior year's free cash, as mentioned. The fund balance from June 30th, if we have not appropriated in the current year's budget, that rolls over. That will be certified in next year's free cash as well. And then outstanding property taxes on there, again, we don't budget for outstanding property taxes, but taxes collected from prior years will increase our revenue, so that's a good source of revenue collected above your estimates. And then on the other side, threats to free cash. Unanticipated expenditures, underestimated benefit liabilities. Again, we'll talk about it in our budget. Health insurance is a big one. Again, we've seen an increase, but if that was something that we didn't budget for, again, you're going to spend more than you budgeted. That's a threat to free cash. That's going to come right off your bottom line. And revenue shortfall, same thing. Like I mentioned before, town consistently budget revenues, cautiously helping to mitigate that risk. So just a couple of examples on the free cash. Number one is an employee earns $1,000 per week. We budgeted $52,000. That position was vacant for 5 weeks. That extra, we call it extra, so that savings of $5,000, that's your underspent expenditures, so that would fall to free cash. On the other side, free cash example number two, we budget $100,000 as our estimated revenue for building permits. If we only collect $95,000, the short amount of $5,000 is deducted from our free cash. So again, we're budgeting conservatively on the revenues. Expenditures, we're budgeting for what we think we need to spend. So getting into revenue sources. So the main drivers are our tax levy. So this is your property taxes. Again, Massachusetts has Prop 2.5, so we are allowed to increase tax levy by 2.5% from the prior year. That includes the new growth. And in Norwood here, we have the debt exclusion as well for the middle and high school construction projects. And again, on the revenue slide will show you how that's calculated, that's shown. Local receipts, another big source of revenue, motor vehicle excise tax, meals, room taxes, payments in lieu of taxes, otherwise known as pilots, ambulance revenues, building permits, and various other licenses, fees, and fines. Another big source of funding is state aid. This is funding received from the Commonwealth to support public education, Chapter 70. The general government operations, unrestricted government, general government aid, UGA. Again, this year's budget for Chapter 70, we're expecting an increase of about $1 million. The government aid is flat. And then other sources, as we've already mentioned, free cash. So certified surplus funds from prior fiscal year can be used if needed. Questions on? Yes?
The only debit exclusions the town has is the middle and high school construction project.
That's correct, yes.
Thank you.
Those two. And there'll be a slide in here to show when those fall off as well. Reserve fund, this is something that the Finance Commission has a reserve fund. It's a designated fund used strictly for unforeseen emergency expenses that arise during the fiscal year. In Norwood's budget, that amount is $150,000. So again, it's restricted. It's only for unforeseen expenses. Requires Finance Commission approval to access. Other uses would need a town meeting vote. Not for routine needs. It cannot be used for known budget shortfalls or planned supplemental appropriations. So, not to pick on any one department, but if the police came to us and said, hey, we want to spend $50,000 here, let's use the FinCom reserve. That's not an appropriate use of it. In the event town hall had a catastrophic failure or something, and we didn't have that money in budget, that would be a use of the Finance Committee reserve. That would be an approved use. Again, support stability, again, maintain budget flexibility for those minor unforeseen expenses. Any questions on the reserve fund? Next, revolving funds. So again, this is a fee or charge collected to cover costs of providing a service. And the revenue is then spent directly from that fund to deliver the service. Most revolving funds will, actually, we did that, so we did not make the change on this one. So unfortunately, that bullet point is not correct. Most revolving funds do not close to the general fund at the end of the year. They stay within their purpose. The two we have on here, the school cafeteria and recreation programs. Again, pretty self-explanatory, but the school cafeteria costs for providing lunch, kids pay into that, that goes into that fund, and that's where we pay our lunch expense, our food expenses, and some of the expenditures related to cafeteria workers. On the other side, recreation programs, so users pay a fee for the class, the cost of that is paid out of that same fund. So again, you don't want to make a profit per se, but you do want to have some sort of fund balance available in the event costs increase, or again, there's another program or service that you want to offer. Just to point out, during COVID, when everything was shut down, most towns saw their recreation programs go into a zero or deficit balance based on the fact that there was no revenue coming in, but there were still programs being offered. All right, debt service. This is something that I'm sure everybody loves. This is just the repayment of the money that the town borrows. Just like a home mortgage, auto loan, nothing different. We are offering bonds, we are selling to the market, and there is an interest rate assigned to that. How is that interest rate accumulated or accounted for? Basically what we'll have is we'll work with our financial advisors. We'll try to figure out what's best for the town, when to offer that. They'll look at our financials. Standard & Poor's will give us a bond rating, as I mentioned before, AA+, one notch below AAA, so we're in very good credit quality. But it does matter, because between AAA and AA+, you're probably looking at about a 15 basis point difference in cost of that loan. You drop down to AA or A, that then increases to 50 to 75 basis points. So it does matter in terms of your overall interest cost that you're going to be paying, that you would be forced to pass on to the taxpayers. Again, borrowing restrictions by law, municipalities cannot borrow money to cover operating expenses or to balance the annual budget. It is strictly for capital investments. Debt service. So we have various types of debt service. Number one is within the levy. So this is debt for lawful projects funded within the town's regular operating budget. These payments are subject to the same limitations as other budget items. Outside the levy, debt exclusion. So this is debt approved by both town meeting and the voters to be paid outside the limits of 2.5. It's funded through a temporary property tax surcharge and tied to a specific project. So again, as mentioned before, Town of Norwood has two, the high school and the Copley Middle School project. Those have been approved outside the levy. So you will see those as different line items in the revenue sources and different line items on our operating expenses. And then other debt is associated with water, sewer, light, broadband. These costs are not paid through taxes, but are instead covered by revenues from customer rates.
So on the exclusion part, usually on exclusions, there's usually a time frame too. Right?
Yes, correct.
So when you go for an exclusion, there's usually a 5 years, 6 years, whatever.
There's a time frame of the borrowing, the length of the borrowing, yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
How much longer is the high school gonna be?
I have a slide that's going to show that, but I believe it's 2048, but I'll double check when I see this.
High school.
Oh, I'm sorry, the high school's 35.
High school.
Sorry, yeah, that's,
Oh,
yeah, sorry, yeah, high school, yeah.
Yeah, there was dead silence there.
Well, we've never been able to tell. This is my first time doing this presentation, so I had to see what happened. So here it is. So debt service, so the town debt overview as of July, the total outstanding debt is $208 million. It sounds like a lot. Obviously, a big portion of that is the middle school project. That also includes debt for the enterprise fund, the water sewer projects, as well as Norwood Light. So I think on the total for the general fund, it's about 30% of that. 70% is paid for by other than taxes per se, outside of the debt exclusion. So again, inside the levy for the 26 annual debt payments, $4.6 million. Outside the levy, $7.9 million. And here it is. So high school project is final payment 2035. middle school project is final payment in 2048. That's a beautiful building. Just a quick primer on Prop 2.5 overrides. In the event there's an override, it's a vote to permanently increase property taxes beyond that annual limit set by Proposition 2.5, which is 2.5% of the prior year's levy. Requires approval from both town meeting and voters at the ballot. And if approved, the tax increase becomes a permanent part of the tax base. Question?
Yeah, if between now and 2048, there's a 2.5 override approved, then that surcharge is still on top of the,
Correct, those debt
Okay.
exclusions stay on top, those will
Stay on
stay
top
on
no matter-
until those
okay.
projects are completed, yes.
What's the interest rate on the debt exclusion for the middle school and high school?
The middle school, I believe, is 3.8%. I'm not sure off the top of my head on the high school, but probably in that 4% range because a piece of that was refinanced. And again, from a financial standpoint, we continue to monitor the markets, and when and if we can refinance, we will certainly do that to get a cheaper rate, but keep the same tenure on the borrowing. Tax rate. So understanding property taxes. Property tax rate is determined by two key factors. The total tax levy. Again, this is the amount the town needs to raise through taxes to fund the budget for the year. It includes all those sources of revenue we talked about, obviously taxes, state aid, local fees, fines, and any reserves that we may use. Tax base is just the total value of all taxable property. And again, it's in here, well, residents often focus on the tax rate. A more accurate measure of impact is the average tax bill. In Norwood, the residential rate is 75%, so it's Norwood residential properties pay 75% of the requested tax levy for the year. Commercial and industrial are 25%. And we're looking at the average tax bill. We put a chart together, just some surrounding towns. Again, in the grand scheme of things, nobody wants to pay taxes, nobody wants to pay more taxes, but Norwood does offer a pretty good value in terms of what we have to pay versus other towns around us. So again, for 2025, 5,854 single-family parcels. Average single-family home is $673,000. Equates to just over $7,000 in taxes.
just going back to the last slide, when you refer to commercial and residential and industrial, when you have multifamily houses that are being taxed, the property tax, is that multifamily property like the apartments, the Avalon apartments, does that go under the 25% or is that calculated under the 75%?
I believe that's all residential, so commercial and industrial are more the companies that are in town.
Okay, thank
Turn
you.
that from global, to the big ones.
How does mixed use fit into that?
It's a great question. You know, how does mixed use fit into that? It's the same, right? No. That's more of
We'll
a-
find out.
Yeah, we'll find out. It's a good question.
Google it.
We will check with the assessor and put some notice on the site. So again, just to kind of close this section out, the utility and enterprise funds. Again, Norwood manages 3 self-supporting funds for essential services. Electric broadband fall under Norwood Light. Water and sewer is operated as a combined enterprise fund. So again, restricted use, the funds here can only be used for expenses directly related to those respective services. No tax support, general fund tax dollars cannot be used to cover utility or enterprise fund expenses. And then we have chargeback for shared services. So you'll see this on our revenue. We have a revenue line item called indirect charges. That is a system of cost allocations that ensures each fund pays its fair share for services like billing, finance, administrative support provided by the town. So annually, we'll look at those accounts. We'll figure out, my staff, the accounting team, how much of our work is being done for Norwood Light, broadband, how much is being done for water sewer. We'll assign a percentage of that, and that is charged in their line budget. You'll see an indirect cost to the general fund, to the water store fund. You'll see that in there to show what we're estimating the charges should be. Is there a question?
Yeah, I thought the municipal light department legally was allowed to make up to an 8% profit?
I know there's a legal limit, I'm not 100% on the light department in terms of what their regulations are. I don't think anybody's here from the light department either, but they are allowed to do that. I believe it's in that range, is it 7.5%, 8%?
Because I thought Norwood sometimes would use $1 million or something from the, it would be a transfer and it would come from the light
We
department.
do have that on our budget as a revenue source, yes.
Well, so then they must be allowed to make a profit after
They are,
they
yes,
pay
they
the
are allowed to
rent.
make a profit, I'm just not sure exactly what that percentage is.
So it's not really true that the funds can only be used for expenses directly related to their respective services if they're allowed to put some of their profit into general operating.
Again, some of that is based on a pilot of payment in lieu of taxes as well.
Okay.
So there's a couple of different ways to kind of push that forward without explaining that it's a profit share or whatever you want them to say. So any other questions on municipal finance terminology, words that you may have heard, still don't understand, or want further clarification on? Yes.
Definition for enterprise fund, what is that?
So an enterprise fund is basically something that is set up for a specific use, like the water and sewer is an enterprise fund. So all the revenues are going to be in there, your user charges, everything is funded into that fund. All expenses are captured within that fund as well. So it's very similar to the light and broadband, but we just classify the water sewer as an enterprise fund for legality purposes. So if there's no other questions, we good, Mike? Yep, good over here. Okay. So now we'll get into the general government budget overview. Again, I'm sure everybody can see this. Perfect. I can see it. I did put it together, so I do know what it is. So again, projected revenues. It's going to be the first. Yeah, this is in the book as well. So everything we pull from here to the rest of the presentation is also in the book. Property tax revenues is going to be the first half. Projected revenues will be the first half, the top half of this sheet. So again, we have our property tax revenue.
Page 11.
Page 11 in your budget book, if you have that.
Thank
If you're looking
you.
at it online.
It's worth mentioning that's available online.
Yeah, it is available online again, for the town meeting notices and documents, and also the finance commission, the town meeting documents. Give you one more minute, we kind of, we'll get to the page and. Okay, so as I mentioned, so the first top half of this is going to be our total revenue and how we calculate what's available for us to spend in the upcoming year. So the first part of this is your property tax revenue. It's our prior year levy limit, plus 2.5%, plus new growth. The town of Norwood uses a $900,000 number for new growth. If you look at the previous 4 years, it's a little bit higher, but the 900,000 is a good conservative estimate, and we would recommend changing that. Below that, we have our property tax level, that's sum of property tax level, then we have our two debt exclusions. Again, the high school excluded debt, Oakley excluded debt. So this is revenue we bring in, brings our total tax levy to $111,491,000. Within our non-property tax revenues, as we talked about before, state aid, otherwise known as the cherry sheet, only because it used to be presented on cherry red paper, so that's cherry sheet. It's historical fact that it's electronic now, nobody sees the color paper it's on. So again, we're at 25 million, yeah, 25 million this year. Our local receipts, again, as we went through, ambulance fees, investment revenue, licenses, fines, 15 million. Here's where we have our utility pilots, as mentioned previously. We have a couple of pilots out there, but the utility, the Norwood Light is the big one. So that's roughly 7.1 million. Sale of cemetery lots is another annual allocation of $125,000. So that is coming from a cemetery fund, that when you're buying lots, there's money that goes into this fund. We take out $125,000, basically offsets the cost of the cemetery maintenance. And then other miscellaneous non-recurring. Again, you can see here it's a big number, 9 million. This is where the indirect charges come in. For this year, obviously, we're using $7,450,000 of free cash. So that's included in that 9.3 million. So that gives our total revenue available, again, 168,691,000. So that's what we know I should step back, before the use of free cash, the 161 million is where we knew our revenue was going to be. So that's what we kind of looked at, okay, now we build our budget, where do we stand? And we'll get into most of these going forward, but the bottom half of that sheet is all of our expenses. So general government budget, 43 million, schools 65, facilities 9, and shared services roughly 47 million. So we knew when looking at all of our expenses after we put, again, just kind of step back to the budget is not just done in a very short fashion. Budget planning, again, we're starting planning for next year now, but in normal circumstances, we're looking at an October timeframe where we get together with the departments, we go through it, see what their asks are, what they need. We then sit with the general manager's office, go through, we have the budget balancing commission, we have the board of selectmen, finance commission, a number of public meetings that we go through and determine what the actual budget is going to be and what the proposal is going to be in this budget book. So again, it's not something that's created in a very short term. It's a long, lengthy process with a lot of communication and a lot of input from various counterparts. So we came up, 168 million is what we need to fund, and that is where we'll go into the budget. Are there any questions on the revenues, or again, we'll get into expenses as we move forward?
Is the breakdown of the shared expenses about the same between the school and general government as it is without the shared expenses?
Shared expense is a little bit different. When we start looking through some of the stuff, we'll see it, but the biggest one that's going to stick out, obviously, we have regional schools in there, then we have the health insurance, which will be a big portion of the schools and town, and then the retirement is mostly the town. So it's kind of a mixed bag there, but it's a representative of both entities between the schools and the town. So for fiscal year 26, operating budget, the key cost drivers, salaries, the largest expense, totaling $33 million. 77% of this, or $25 million, is made up of departments including police, fire, DPW, engineering, library, recreation, snow and ice operations. Again, that's consistent among all the towns as well, that those are the largest entities within the town government. Those are the largest salaries. You'll find that in just about every other town you look at as well. In terms of top non-salary costs, what are we looking at? We're looking at trash collection of $3 million, IT systems and services of $1 million, snow removal $848,000. So the snow removal is interesting because it's the only line item account that we can overspend per Massachusetts Department of Revenue. So again, you can't reduce your budget, so we'll keep it flat year over year. But in the event we had a bad winter and we need to spend $1.5 million, we can do that. It comes out of your free cash in the end or additional appropriation, but it's the only line that we can. So that's important to know when we start looking at some of these expenses. That's why we budget to, okay, this is what we think we're going to spend. Operating capital makes up less than 1% of the total budget. Again, we do have a fall town meeting where we allocate other capital projects through the use of free cash and or borrowing if it's so applicable. Just of note, we made a $178,000 reduction in road construction funding to meet our overall financial targets that we came out of with budget balance at the beginning of FinCom and Board of Selectmen.
It's actually me. Can I ask a question or answer a question? So the answer about the commercial properties was it depends on what percentage of the building is commercial or residential. If it's 50-50 commercial versus residential, it's taxed 50% at the commercial rate, 50% at the residential rate. So it's based on that split what the rate is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. So another big aspect of the budget, contractual obligations. So cost of living adjustments, otherwise known as COLA, typically range from 2 to 2.5%. Step increases, so again, if we hire a new employee at a bottom step ACE level, step 1, they're entitled to on their annual, what's that? Anniversary, yeah, sorry, blank there. They're eligible to move up to step 2, so again, that's generally in the 2.75 to 3.25% per step for most of the units and non-union employees. Public safety feature a wider range of increases, but have fewer steps overall. Additional salary growth, longevity payments, and education incentives that further enhance compensation. So if we look at a snapshot of our operating budget summary, again, salaries, $33 million, changes 1.9 up 6%. That ties into your COLA plus your steps. Again, we have a number of employees that are entitled to that, so just in general, you're looking at 5% right there. So obviously we have some educational incentives, some other contracts that have been settled, 6% on our salaries. Our operating budget, modest increase, 419,000, still 4.58%, but we'll show you what the makeup is of that in a second. Capital, 388,000, again, we took out the money for the road, so we're down 32%, looks great, but not the greatest story there. So general fund totals, 43,187,399, up 2.1 million, or up 5.18%. So we can go through these fairly quickly. If anybody wants to stop me on any of these, again, I think the general themes are you're going to see salary increase reflects COLA. There won't be a lot of change in operating expenses. And then we had a chart showing employees. I believe overall we're up to 1 employee. Overall, we have 2 in facilities, losing 1 in recreation, and a half that in senior center, right? Yes.
4.
Full. It's a full. Okay.
Rec, yeah.
Okay. We'll see in a few minutes here. So selectmen, $83,000 salaries. Again, I think as Amanda, she does not get paid for that job. That's the assistant in the office doing the day-to-day work. This board of selectmen is a volunteer position. Operating expenses are the same. Again, full-time employees, we have 1 in that office. General manager, again, salary reflects COLA, step change, no changes made to operating expenses here. Again, general manager personnel summary, 7.5 employees, remaining at 7.5. Again, all of this is in the book, it's in the back pages, section 4, all the supporting schedules are back there. Finance mission, again, salaries, that's for our stenographer. Operating expenses are up a little bit. The main driver of that is just our annual audit fee. That is about $100,000. Not something we want to pay, it's something we have to pay. We have to be audited. Finance accounting, again, COLA, step change, longevity. We did decrease operating expenses just to reflect departmental needs, not a huge amount, but some of the paper, some of the other stuff we're looking at, we don't need that as much anymore, so we were able to decrease that. Assessors, same thing. There's a nominal increase in legal expenses, and then full-time equivalents, 3 people, still 3 people. That office hasn't changed. Same here, salary change reflect contractual steps, COLA. We do have what looks like a sizable increase in operating expenses. Again, the treasurer's office does a lot of the mailing, does a lot of postage, and then they pay the fee for our ambulance billing services. So there's a percentage of all the revenue we bring in from the ambulance we have to pay out. Can't be a net revenue collection, it has to be an expense being shown out. We have to show a payment to that, so that is in that line. The line is probably still underfunded per se, but we'll get there. But again, it looks like a big increase, but that is offset by the increases in revenue. Same thing, no change in personnel. Town council, no changes, leaving that the same.
Question. We have an anonymous person that raised their hand. I don't know if they have a question.
Okay, is there a
Yeah,
question?
go ahead if you'd like to speak.
Sorry, my name is Ed. Hey, it's Ed Ferris.
Oh, it's Ed. Hi.
I was curious if anybody put in a projection on the operating costs for the ambulance service at the hospital.
Are you asking if there's been an analysis of the cost of the hospital being down?
Yes, because with it down, our operating costs have gone up. I was wondering if anybody did a projection of how that's going to expand over time.
I mean, I think that there's obviously you have the hospital task force that's looking at items like that. This is more for the upcoming budget. So that was not factored into the upcoming budget, but there are certainly discussions going on regarding the implications of what happened there.
Right, okay, so nobody's done an analysis forward.
There is work being done behind the scenes, yes, but there is no analysis presented in the actual annual budget document.
Okay, thanks.
So moving on to human resources, same thing, salary changes, operating expenses reflect an increase in employment testing and supplies for recruiting and job fairs. Same here, we did approve a additional employee, a generalist position back in May. We added that in the early fall. That is the 4 to 5 from 24 to 25, maintains that 26 with 5 employees. IT, information technology, and salary changes, software programs, as everybody I'm sure you're aware, these things are not cheap, they continue to escalate. So we do have an increase in that budget, and our capital expenses for our annual equipment refreshes. Again, no change in personnel. Town clerk, elections and registrations, again, same salary changes, contract, COLA, longevity. Elections and registrations, we have 1 election going forward, and 3 last year. So we're able to reduce those expenses. Same, 4 employees, still have 4 employees. Community development, again, I feel like I keep repeating myself, but it's the same in every department. Salary changes are COLA, obligated steps, no change in operating expenses, and we have the $10,000 put back in there for the conservation land acquisition. No change in personnel. Annual town report, again, we just have to do a small increase to reflect printing costs, like everything else, printing is going up, so small increase there, $75. General government, again, no changes here, it's an easy one. Police department, contractual mandated increases, drive salary growth, operating expenses increased by an average of 2.5%, reflecting increasing costs to run the department. So again, 10.5 million, so the total budget here is 11.1 million. Police department personnel summary, same 70 for FY26.
Good question.
Fire department, yes.
Can we go back to the police numbers? So if we didn't have any change in staff, you're saying $800,000 in salary increases?
There's a new contract, yes, so there's a bunch of educational incentives and steps.
That just seems like a large number for step increases.
Does that reflect the prior year as well? Or was there a retro and then, so it wasn't captured last year? Do we know?
No, the retro being paid out for what we're doing now, I guess, wouldn't have been captured in that 25 number. So the Superiors were without a contract that they were waiting.
So it might be last year's budget might not have reflected the full cost of the upcoming contracts.
Correct. Right, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
I'm curious, do any of the salaries cross over different slides? So that for one of them, the salaries was $15,000. Is that one person separate from all the other slides, or is that somebody who has a position with another salary also getting the
No, that
15,000?
15,000 was related to one position.
Okay.
Yes. Fire department, again, new contract, salary growth, operating expenses, again, reflecting increase in costs, particularly medical supplies. Again, we've talked about that, obviously the hospital being down, medical expenses, we're using more, so those lines have been adjusted as such.
Do we get revenue for selling those supplies, or?
We don't sell the supplies, those are the supplies they use to keep people healthy, and right? Yeah. So we have to pay for those.
I see it was built into the cost of the.
Some of that's built into the cost that we bill the patients, yes, yeah. So there's obviously, there's a number, a set number, correct me if I'm wrong, chief, there's a set number that we bill for each run that should include the cost of labor, cost of supplies. Doesn't fully cover the cost, but it's an offset. Yes.
I have a question. On the line item, you have firefighters, paramedics, EMTs. How come the employees are going down, yet they're doing more runs? Wouldn't have you have hired more?
23.
Yeah, wouldn't you have hired more people for that item? Because they're out of town more than they are in town. It seems like you're shortfalling the fire department and they're gonna have burnout. No pun intended, mind you.
Do you want to address it?
So our staffing number of 60 has been constant. Those numbers there are the firefighters, but then we also have lieutenants and captains on each shift that make up the 15 per group. So we haven't lost anybody, but we haven't gained anybody either.
So as Chief Bailey mentioned, so if you look at captains and lieutenants, it offsets. So captains went from 4 to 5, lieutenants went from 5 to 9. So there's 4 add there, 52 to 48 is the 4 add.
We also lost the dispatchers when we went to HREC.
Okay.
So we lost 4 people there.
Can I ask you a follow-up question?
Sure.
Do we actually have enough paramedics and EMTs to get us through till we can get a hospital up and running? Because that hospital's not gonna up and run overnight, and it's not gonna, probably won't be in the next 2 or 3 years. So do we have enough to cover all these runs? Because we do have an aging population in Norwood.
So our call volume continues to increase at a high rate. We're managing the calls that we have now, but we're relying heavily on mutual aid to do that. We've had 198 mutual aids into the town since the first of the year, so, and that predominantly that is at the ambulance. Mutual aid ambulance is coming in, so we could use more staffing to staff the 3rd ambulance, but that's not currently in the cards, so.
And I think in Mr. Mizuko's opening letter, it does state in there, obviously, if we had unlimited funding, there would be additional adds to the fire department, but we don't have unlimited funding, so
Yeah.
it was something that we couldn't fit into this budget.
Okay, I get it, but I'm, not to be a bully here, but the fire department is our safety net for this town, whether it's a burning building or a medical emergency. Yet we added more on under, I forgot what department was, HR. There was more added, another generalist was added under HR, which I find kind of odd. I'd rather add to this department than to a department of HR, because it seems like HR is growing and it's just, I don't know. I just think we have it backwards. Not to be disrespectful in any way, shape, or form, but I know.
I think the chief would agree, going forward, again, we're gonna look at it going forward, because we're all identifying that, yes, we do believe there's a need for additional firefighters, paramedics. I think you can't just add one, you gotta add a couple of them to do it, but we need to find.
No, I get it, I just.
So it'll certainly be asked for, when we start looking at next year's budget, I can guarantee that an increase in that line is gonna be there, at least initially, till we see where we go.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Can I just make one comment? The fire department actually, over the past year,
Introduce yourself.
oh, sorry, I'm Lisa, I'm the HR director. I just wanted to make one comment, and that is that over the past year, the fire department has made a change in how they're recruiting. So it used to be civil service, we would get all of our list from civil service. Now we're doing a lot more working with the department to recruit for the firefighters, paramedics, and all of that too. So the new recruiting position is certainly helping with that. I think the chief would hopefully agree with that.
Thank you for explaining.
It's helping to get quality candidates, but the number still doesn't change, the 60 that we have on the line. But we are getting quality candidates that are coming in that are, in this case, we have 2 that will be onboarding in 2 weeks that are already trained, both on the fire side and have experience as medics. So we'll be able to put them out on the street almost immediately. So that is a positive. They're to fill a retirement and a resignation that we had a couple of months ago. So they're not new positions per se, they're just to fill positions that we currently have.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so moving on, building department, same thing, salary changes, very small operating increase expense, reflects required safety gear and training for the state's new code cycle. Same here, no change in personnel, 5 last year, 5 this year. Emergency management, no change there. Traffic control, fire alarm, street lighting, we own the street lights, we have to pay for the electricity, that's the street lighting. traffic control, fire alarm is the repair of those assets. Again, we've adjusted that to reflect the spending trend. So again, everything's getting more expensive.
Yeah, is there any plan to update the traffic and light controls in town? They seem kind of outdated, a little slow.
General manager, that's, finance doesn't get involved in that.
Mark Ryan is here.
Mark, yeah.
Mark Ryan, Director of Public Works, Town Engineer. Question the signals in the center?
Yeah.
Yeah, we went out to bid, we have a contract with Coviello Electric, and they will be starting work probably the end of May to start replacing signals at 9 intersections within the center.
Thank you.
Moving along, Public Works, Engineering, again, salary changes here, not much change in the operating expenses. Highway maintenance, as we mentioned before, we reduced the capital amount, operating amount is the same. Snow and ice, that's what I was talking about, to maintain that. We cannot reduce that, so we will maintain that at $1,017,200.
So we lowered the funds for the roads. Does that mean we're going to expect worse roads in the next year or two?
No, there's other sources of funding, but I will defer again to Mr. Ryan to talk about the road plans.
Yeah, we got a lot of money, $2.8 million in capital outlay in the fall. So that with the operating highway maintenance, we've got a contract out that was awarded, and 35 streets can be done. So it's quite a bit of work is still going to be ongoing. So we've made great progress in the last 5 years. We're getting in pretty good shape.
Yeah, that wasn't just an arbitrary cut. We did talk to the department to make sure that, okay, can you live within this cut if it has to happen? Yes.
The snow and ice salaries, are those contracts with companies that provide snow and ice removal, or are those people
That's
in?
internal, so salaries are internal to Norwood employees. Overtime basically is what that is.
So there's one person in Norwood whose job is snow and ice removal?
No, there's a number, there's a whole number, just about everybody in DPW, right?
The whole
It's called,
DPW.
yeah.
So is that like a portion of their salary?
No, it's the overtime costs.
Oh,
So if
okay,
So
so,
during the storm, and during the event that they're in working for, we charge an overtime line, and that's what gets charged there.
and so overtime's considered a salary,
It's
not overtime?
classified here, but if you look at the budget book, it's gonna say overtime.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Waste collection with the landfill, again, nominal increase, reflects increasing costs. Waste removal, again, a significant driver of the overall operating costs. Entering year 3 of a 5-year contract, where we're being charged more, we're throwing out more. It's just a cost that we have to pay. It goes up. I think it's the combination of a lot of the work from home and a lot of people ordering stuff. There's just a lot more trash that goes out. Cemetery, parks maintenance, again, salary changes in cemetery, operating reflects increasing cost of materials for groundskeeping, cost of materials for parks maintenance, basically the same nominal increases, but yes, sir.
How much is spent in private contractors for maintenance in the parks and stuff?
Do you happen to know, Mark?
Between 70,000 and 80,000. Years ago, when we took over all the fields, the athletic fields from the school department, the decision was made, rather than hire employees full-time, we would hire contractors to help us cut some of the fields.
Is that true for the town hall? And I notice this private contractors doing that now. Senior centers, private contractors.
Yeah, facilities had, when they became the facility department, they spent a lot more time maintaining the buildings. They had to hire subcontractors to cut the grass around the facilities.
So that is a line item in this facilities budget. You can see contracted services in the book and facilities. So that's different from the parks maintenance that Mr. Ryan was talking about. Personnel summary. Go through that fast, but again, no change in personnel. Airport, again, salary changes, no changes to the operating budget. 2 employees down there. Health Department, again, we do have a change in the salaries, so salary changes reflect the steps, COLA, and then we also have an ending of the American Rescue Plan Act funding, so that impacts full-time salaries. I believe we're 2 employees that were now fully budgeted into this from prior year. So they were always employees, they're not new. Their salary was paid for by the American Rescue Plan, now it's being paid for by the operating budget. As I just mentioned, 8 employees last year, 8 this year, just 2 of those have to be picked up in the operating budget, the salaries. A portion of it too, right? It's not the, stand like it, Stacy, it wasn't the full cost of those 2 employees?
No, it was a portion of it. It was, you basically saving some money somewhere else, so we were just using the ARPA funding for that, and I think some CARES Act
Yep.
money also.
Okay, but again, that money
So it's
is-
not a grant per se. It's
Correct.
not a
It was
grant
use of funds.
employee that, yes.
Question, do we still have the nurse from St. Catherine's on here, or is that, because I remember there was a discussion at
Yes,
the
it
meeting
is.
last time, or time before?
No, that we ended up doing a one-time fund for them to give them notice that the funding was going away. I think that was done off budget last year. So the answer is no, that's not in the budget for this year. Council on Aging, Senior Center, same here, ending ARPA funding, so there's a pickup of salaries. And again, slight decrease in operating expenses to reflect the historic trends. So you'll see here, full-time equivalent is a half employee, so that's the way we work it out. Yes?
Just a point of clarification, were the ARPA funds really because of COVID?
The ARPA, the
And the
American Rescue
impact
Plan
of
Act,
COVID.
yes, yes, the impact of COVID.
And that pandemic has substantially gone away. So why are we keeping the extra help if COVID pandemic is not here anymore?
I don't think it was extra help. I think it was just that we were able to use those funds to offset the cost of some employees. So again, as I mentioned, we did not increase any employees.
Okay,
We were just able to change the source of the funding.
I see, okay.
And again, I
That's important.
I could go on for 15 minutes about ARPA and
Yeah,
the troubles it's created for municipalities.
yeah,
You know, when we're gonna come down to it, the chief is gonna mention we'll need a ladder truck at some point. 5 years ago, that was $1.5 million. We're looking at $3 million for that
Yeah.
now. ARPA was so restricted in terms of what you can use the funds for. It's created massive inflation, water projects, road projects, everything. It's crazy. It was great at the time, but it's long-lasting effects that we're all gonna have to pay going forward. Veteran Services, again, salary decrease. We have a staff turnover, a new leader in that department. Operating expenses of $171,000. $130,000 of that is for veterans benefits. So those benefits, we get reimbursed at 75% in the following year. So it looks like a big number. It's $130,000, obviously, to help deserving veterans. We do get reimbursed from the state 75% of that, whatever we spend during the year.
Sorry, so if I were to total up the total number of employees on each of these slides, that would be the total number of employees within the entire Norwood government? Or would there be crossover between some of these where somebody would be on the veteran services and their salary would be accounted for there, as well as, say, just on the fire department, because we're talking about them, and their salary would be represented there as well?
No, so if you look in the budget book in section 4, there is a grid of total town employees.
Okay.
So each one of these is then, it's just a one-pager that you can look at all employees by department.
Oh,
There's no
thank you.
next crossover between two different departments.
Okay, thanks.
Library, again, steps, COLA. Library sitting down with them, they were able to reduce some of the expenses to show the historic trends. So the increase is not as much as you would normally see. We're able to look at some of those line items and say, okay, that's not needed, or we can reduce that. Clayton's here if there's any questions on the library. But again, capital line, he was able to reduce that to manage cost, $6,000 is what he needs. Same personnel summary. 20 employees, 20 asked for in fiscal '26. Recreation, we do have a salary decrease here to staff turnover. We also have one less employee, I'll show you in a second. Operating expenses are expected to increase the Hall's Pool online. Again, some of that will be offset by increased revenue from pool entry. Not a huge amount, but again, every little bit counts in the revenue. And again, here's, as I mentioned, we had 5 last year. We've removed the assistant superintendent and we've gone down to 4 employees. Celebrations, no changes there. Again, this pays for 4th of July concerts, holiday decorations. Some of it's offset by donations as well, right, Mike?
Yes.
So this is not, this is not what it costs to run all those events. It costs a lot more than that. But this is what the town is appropriating.
We appreciate all the donors, thank you.
Yes. So as I mentioned before, so here's just a brief summary of our operating expense analysis. As you can see, the line items we've highlighted are more or less contractual. Treasurer expenses, postage, ambulance fee collections, like I mentioned. IT, software licenses. Munis is our enterprise system that we use for all our books, records, and accounting. It's a very robust system, but they also have massive municipalities, and it's very difficult to change from that system. So they're going to increase on average 3 to 5%, mostly 5% on an annual basis. Fire expenses, as we mentioned before, medical supplies, waste removal, again, contractual, that's the $188,000. Recreation expenses, as I mentioned, second pool, again, partially offset by pool fees collected. So just on those line items alone, it's 87% of our operating expense increase. So there's really not a lot there that we're trying to increase on the overall operating lines. Same thing here for capital, again, just reiterates what we said already. We took out the $178,000 from capital, so it looks like we're down 32%. Never great to take out your capital because then you have to look to fund it elsewhere in the fall through free cash or something else. But we did what we had to make the budget the number that we needed to. All right, we're into shared fixed costs. So these are all the big line items that kind of don't fit into an operating expense category. It's debt service, insurance, retirement, all the, let's see here. Good news here, debt service, we did not issue any debt last year. We do not have any planned in next year's budget at the current time. We'll see what happens during capital in the fall, see where we stand with that would be for 27. So we're probably not going to issue any general operating fund debt in 26. So we're down $331,000 there. Yes, sir.
Tom McClintock. So what would it take for Norwood to become a AAA town? Because 15 basis points is huge against a number like that.
Yeah, and so I'm going to try to cage this with the answer that I don't really want to give, because I think the upside of getting a AAA is the 15 basis points, but there's ways, in my opinion, there's ways to mitigate that. We can offer bonds when other municipalities aren't, or when money becomes available in that market. And I did this in Vernon. We were the same thing. We're AA+. We got a AAA rate because we timed the market, working with our financial advisors. They knew when people were putting money to use in the market, and they knew that there wasn't a lot of other supply coming. So to answer your question, to get to AAA, again, we have to manage a little bit better going forward in terms of the use of free cash. We've had operating budget surpluses, so all of that's pretty good. The real deciding factor is the economics of the town. And I don't really think we can get to AAA based on that. Okay. If you look at there's a number of municipalities in Massachusetts that have AAA. A lot of them are wealthier towns. I just think that pulls us back a little bit. But I can confidently say that if we are issuing bonds, we're going to work with that, because we don't really have a date that we need to issue those. It's for projects that we know are going forward. Right. So we can work with the financial institutions and try to figure out, okay, what's the best time to take advantage of the market. Again, regional schools, Norfolk Aggie, Blue Hills, these are costs that come based on the number of students that we are sending there. Again, we did see a decrease in Blue Hills, so that's another line item that's going down. Retirement and pension contributions, this is a big increase. Again, so general government employees and non-certified school staff are members of the Norwood retirement system. We are given a recommended actuarial contribution every year from PERAC, the state's retirement board. Basically, that's what we have to budget for. So that's what this number is showing. Our pension fund is about 76% funded. We have to be fully funded by 2039 is what we've just been approved for based on our funding schedule. So subsequent years, this is going to be up 4% until they come back and tell us. Obviously, the market's moved a little bit over the past few weeks and months. We don't know where that's going to be in the next report, next annual report. So that number may be increasing faster than we expect going forward as well. So just something to watch.
Is that
Yes.
Is that given a rating of red light, yellow light, green light, the pension fund, as many pension funds are given, depending on what percentage they're funded?
Not that I'm aware of, I don't think so. We kind of fall in the middle right now where we are in terms of Massachusetts and other pension funds. But there is no rating that I'm aware of.
Thank you.
Workers' comp, again, all non-public safety employees are covered under the town's general employee insurance plan. Public safety employees are separate insurance coverage. Again, just based on trend, this is where we think we need to be in terms of the overall cost increase. Health insurance, again, this is one that, if there's anything that keeps us up at night in terms of town, it's the health insurance. When we first started doing the budget, we were expecting anywhere from 8 to 9%, which was consistent with last year. The GIC, who we are members of, and they have the majority of the state, they published a document that said it would be 10.5%. They then sent us the rates, it was 13%. If anybody's seen the recent headlines, the GIC is running out of money to pay claims at the end of May. So they're not funded well, they're going to ask for an additional appropriation from the governor to pay the claims through June. So that one is obviously $2 million. We hope that next year is not the same increase, but again, based on the cost of healthcare, as everybody is well aware, it's not going down anytime soon. So, and I think Mr. Mizuko's mentioned before, it's based on we'll continue to look at it, we'll work with, we have a consultant, but we'll work with somebody to take a look at if our loss ratio improves, can we go elsewhere? There's not a lot of other options out there, but it's something we'll monitor. Again, we threw this in here just to show other towns. As I said, I was on the finance committee in Medway, so I'd like to take credit for that, but because it's done after me. So they're self-insured, but again, before that, they had significant large claims. Those large claims have trended off for one reason or another, so it was the right time for them to move to self-insured. But again, it's something that we'll always monitor.
So could you define self-insured for us?
Yeah, so it's basically self-insured. So what our budget would do is pay all claims. So if we're budgeting $20 million, we're going to pay basically a self-insured administrator to manage all of that, but the claims we would be on the hook for.
Right, so any of the monies we would have sent to Harvard or GIC or wherever.
The GIC.
We would state in an account and then it would have been paid from the town.
Correct. But to do so, again, we did transition from full to self when I was in the town of Vernon. You have to get about 3 months of claims as a reserve, and you need to build that up going forward. So it would be a significant cost for us to do that up front. But again, it's something we'll continue to monitor. Medicare, again, we have to pay 1.45% of the salary. So again, as we mentioned before, COLAs, steps, all have increased, so we're going up $74,000. Capital, again, these are line items that have been put in the budget in the past few years. It makes sense. We have school, police, DPW, and fire vehicles. It's great to have those in annually. Again, we're anticipating a slight increase. To be honest, that's probably not enough for everything that we've planned for, so we may have to scale back in terms of getting 3 school vehicles. We have to look at 2. It all depends on the cost and where they are. But again, inflation has significantly increased the cost of all vehicle purchases. Liability insurance, again, the town has comprehensive insurance, covers all town buildings, schools. So we've had good news here, although there is an increase, it's not as much as it could be and not as much for other towns. We were the recipient of the 2024 Risk Management Award, which recognized commitment to safety and renewed compliance with U.S. Occupational Health and Safety Administration standards. So we do have various employee trainings and workshops that give us a certain amount of credits during the year. Mike Rosen leads the efforts there and is all over us from every department to make sure we maximize all of our possible credits. And again, the FinCom reserve, we went through this before, it's a $150,000 line item in the budget. Any remaining balance does go to free cash. Facilities. So not a lot of detail on this one, we do have it in the book, but again, operating expenses are increasing, higher costs for supplies and services, I mentioned. Fixing boilers, fixing air conditioning, that is all very expensive now. So again, this budget is another one that we could have gone up significantly more than we did. The department does support and service all general government and school department facilities, so that's kind of a risk account, I'd like to call it, because there's a lot of line items in there but if something goes wrong, it's gonna be a very expensive fix. That is all I have. Is there any other questions on the general budget? Yes,
Going forward, how do you forecast the capital expenditures?
the ones in the budget?
Well, going forward, like, you know you're gonna need 3 school roofs,
Yeah, so there's a capital outlay committee that does all that, chaired by Mr. Rosen.
general government and school
Yeah,
government?
so general government, schools, facilities, so we put together that 5-year plan. It's out there, it's on the website, right?
Just as a point of clarity, I'm staff liaison to the Capital Outlay Committee. It's actually comprised of representatives from the Selectmen, the School Committee, Finance Commission, and members at large. I believe the chair at the moment is Selectman Bob Donnelly. But yes, we have a plan that it's a fall cycle. We go to the fall town meeting with in this case, with the FY25 plan. So we start the work on that right after town meeting ends in May. We start in June on that. There's a 5-year plan, so if you want to see what the projected plan is for FY25, look at FY24's year 2. That's how it
If these numbers are big, you should look at that plan.
Oh, boy.
You know, going forward for years.
Yeah,
it's a
that's
lot
why I
of
was
money.
curious.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Tim Love, please come up.
Yeah, so school department of superintendent and Sean Mannion, director of finance and operations.
Hi, everybody. Tim Luff, Superintendent of Schools. It's very nice to see you all today. Obviously, we have quite a portion of the budget for the town. And I'm going to share a little bit of an overview, then I'm going to hand it over to Sean Mannion, our Assistant Superintendent of Finance, to really kind of talk through the details of it. The budget itself, and I'm going to go the right way, I hope that's great.
That's right.
Really comes down to a few different things. And it's been the culmination of a lot of hard work over the past, I want to say, 7 to 8 months. You know, Sean and I were here for a hot minute before we really started looking at the budget and going through all of cost centers with the managers of each cost center, really talking about, what do you need for level service? What do you need for those to provide services similar to what you're doing this year for next year? And then B, what are those improvements that you think you need, that you've been asking for, those things that you've wanted, those wishes that you have? And then finally, hey, what are those things you haven't used for a really long time? What are those things that we can reduce or possibly look at for efficiencies over time? We took both the level service budget, right, the budget that we, in order to provide the same or similar services than we are this year, and we brought that budget forth with some improvement requests as well. Through a process with FinCom and our finance and our other town partners, we actually started out with an 8.1% increase to our budget over FY25. We did not land there in the end. We reviewed a lot of different tiered changes, service reductions. You'll see in this budget a lot to do with the opening of your investment of the new Copley Middle School. In particular, this budget represents 6.6 additional positions over the FY25 budget. And there's not a direct line here, I will share with you, because we, in the process, looked at positions that we wanted to add, looked at positions that we could possibly reduce, and then we looked at the positions we needed to make sure that we supported the investment that you have made in Copley for the following year. We also looked at a lot of different parts of my entry plan and the findings from my entry plan as I went through and I interviewed more than 150 to 200 folks and got more than 550 or so survey results on my entry plan, as well as more than 7,000 ratings actually for certain thoughts in the entry plan. One of the primary things that I heard from almost everyone was safety. Safety, safety, safety. Discipline issues in our schools, safety of our staff, the safety of our students, ensuring that protocols are in place to keep everyone safe. Special education was another big one that we've heard. You, through your grace, we invested in a special ed audit that we're actually possibly completing now. We're going to have those results at the end of May. That audit's just about done. But there were a lot of questions there, so we shifted around special education positions. We created some safety positions. We created some behavioral intervention positions to really work with the kids and provide behavioral support to students. And so we added quite a few things. What you'll see at the end is a $65,292,117 budget, or 6.7% increase. This budget didn't come without some hardships and some looking at some other efficiencies and identifying things that are really good for Norwood and good for students, but maybe weren't as efficient as possible. So you'll see in this budget a reduction of our Latin program at the high school, which is a wonderful and incredible program for many students, but not a significant number of students. You'll also see the reduction of some library services at the elementary level. We restructured our specialists at the elementary level, so we could move them up to the middle school, but also provide some really strategic services where we can reduce library services, but increase things like art, music, and wellness. The primary piece, again, that you'll see here, and actually, go one more, is the opening of Coakley. The 6.6 positions aren't the only thing that we're investing in Coakley. There are 12.8 support staff that are moving up to the Coakley Middle School, either through the 6.6 that we're adding to the budget or through transfers from the elementary. There are also 12 general ed positions, 5th grade teachers that are moving up to the middle, 5th grade teachers that are moving up from their elementary schools to the middle school, for a total of about 24.8 positions, 24, I'm not quite right there. Roughly 24 positions that are moving up to Coakley, and Sean will have that detail on the slides to support the opening of the school. Again, at one point in time, it was looking primarily at somewhere of 30, 35 was kind of the talk, with 17 new positions that we would have needed. We're landing at 6.6 new positions total in this budget to what we hope to provide is a really great baseline to support students. Yep.
What does that put class size at?
I'm sorry?
What does that put class size at for 5th graders?
So there's 290 students, it'll be about 20 to 25 students per class. So the idea is that we want to support the opening of Coakley, provide improvements throughout the district, but also look at efficiencies. And again, we're going to continue to do this work as time goes on. We have a lot of work to do in terms of financial questions next year. So we'll continue to do that work and hope that we can not have such a high increase. And I do look at the 6.7% and I say, this is pretty high. This is not something that I wanted to ask the taxpayers for my first year here, but it's also with the opening of the new school. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Sean. I just want you to know that we did a lot of work on this, and we'll continue to do so to go through, and I really appreciate your support.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Sean Mannion. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations. So you'll see a few slides that just kind of reinforce the details that the superintendent just provided. This is sort of a top-level look at our budget and also sort of how we've gotten to where we've landed. So you can see at the top, our final FY25 budget is 570.7 FTEs. This is the operating budget. This doesn't include positions that are paid by grants or revolving funds. We do have about 33 positions that are paid through revolving funds, like school lunch and grants as well. There's some grants that pay for positions. And our preliminary budget, as the Superintendent Luff mentioned, for FY26 is 582.3 FTEs, $66.2 million. It was an increase of 8.1%. It was an increase at that time of 11.6 FTEs, and those were all for the middle school. Then you can see below that, we worked through with BBC and FinCom, and eventually we landed at a budget that's a 66.7% increase. The final budget is $65,292,117, 577.3 FTEs. It's an increase of 6.6 FTEs. There are some, we just made a footnote, there are some benefit costs associated. We recognize every time that there's an increase in FTEs, there is a benefit cost on the town side because the shared costs are the health insurance and the Medicare. So there is about $150,000 that would need to be added for those health benefits. The next couple slides go through the positions in a little bit more detail. So you can see at the top, there's new positions that are added for the middle school, for opening a new middle school, especially with grade 5 added. So you can see there's one special education teacher, an assistant principal, an art teacher, a music teacher, a school counselor, an English language learning teacher, and 0.6 of an administrative assistant. So those total the increase in the school budget of 6.6 FTEs. And then, as the superintendent mentioned, You can see below, there's a number of positions that are allocated to the middle school through transfers from other places in the budget. So you can see there's a .2 music teacher, it's transferred from an elementary position. There's one world language added at the middle school that is transferred from the reduction of the high school Latin position. There's a wellness position transferred from elementary up to the middle school. There are 4 special education teachers all transferred from the elementary. And you can see total transfers, 6.2 FTEs, but the increase in the budget is 0 because these FTEs are just transferring from other places to the middle school. Yes?
Your 4 special education teachers, are those for pull-out resources for kids? And then the inclusion teacher will be actually teaching content? Is that how that works?
There are, these special ed teachers, this is 3 inclusion teachers and 1 program teacher. There are also a special education inclusion teacher in the budget up top. So I think it's 4, I want to say 3 inclusion transfers plus 1 program teacher.
Okay.
And then an additional inclusion teacher up. So they're all teaching content, though. I think it's important to know that, depending on the program teacher. So some will teach in the general content area classes supporting reading, writing. Some will, even in a specialized program, will still support the academic content at high levels.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Great. And then the last line you can see, as we mentioned, grade 5 classroom teachers, 12 classroom teachers will move up from the various elementary schools to the middle school. Again, there's no increase in the budget for those, they're just moving from schools to the middle school. And on this slide, you can see some other staffing changes that aren't related to the middle school. So you can see we're increasing 1 teacher at the high school for the freshman academy. This has been an initiative that's been going on along for quite a few years, that we're finally adding a position that supports the 9th grade class coming up into the high school. And then for safety and security, you can see we're adding 2 behavior interventionist teachers. That's been a goal of the district for quite some time. And 1 director of safety, compliance, and communications. We are also reducing, we're moving 2 BCBA occupational therapists, these are special education related services positions, to what we call Mass Health Medicaid funding. So we're hoping to increase the revenue that we get from Medicaid, federal Medicaid funding, by claiming for more services. And we have a warrant article that also is requested in this regard. The warrant will give us a 1-year lead time so that we can work with these staff to do more claiming and increase this revenue source that will eventually pay for 3 positions. But 2 of the positions that it will pay for will be coming out of our operating budget. So these aren't really a reduction in overall positions for the school, but they are coming off the budget and going to another funding source. And then you can see there's a reduction of 2 library positions. So overall here, we're adding 4 positions, but we're reducing 4 positions, so the net change to the budget is 0.
Sorry, just a quick question again. Apologies. What is the criteria for a behavior interventionist, as it definitely does not meet the same qualifications as a BCBA?
Yeah, we're expecting master level behavioral support degrees, something along the lines of a BCBA, and actually a few of the ones that we just hired are going for the BCBA, for example. They're almost complete with those schools. So it's typically some kind of a master's level program. It could be a social worker, it could be an adjustment counselor.
Okay.
But the idea is that they're working with general education population rather than many of our BCBAs are working with the special education population.
Okay, thank you.
That was it on the staffing FTE increases. So this is just one slide similar to what they did on the town side. It shows sort of the how the staffing increases work, sort of the basis of our base salary increases. So when we look at teachers, which is our largest group of employees, you can see, similar to on the town side, what the cost drivers are on the salary increases, just based on the collective bargaining agreements that we have in place. Teachers who receive a step increase, that's typically 4.5% for a teacher getting that anniversary step increase. And here in Norwood, about 56% of the employees, the teachers that we have, are already on that maximum step. So they don't receive that 4.5% step anymore. They're 56% of the teachers, but that's 63% of the salaries, because those are your highest paid teachers. So 63% of the salaries for teachers don't receive that step increase. Teachers can also get lane and column transfers when they get a master's degree or a bachelor's degree. They move up in salary based on those changes in degree. We budget about $230,000 for that. And then, of course, there's a cost of living increase for the teacher's contract itself, and that's 3.25% for next year, and that's for all teachers, even those that are at the maximum and don't receive the step increase anymore. Other increases include longevity, stipends, reimbursements, and things like that. This is just an overview of what brought us from our original budget down to the final budget that we landed at. So we had a number of reductions that were called our Tier 1 reductions that we went through with the Budget Balancing Committee. We reduced our technology by $37,000. We transferred positions instead of adding positions of equal to 5. We took some money out of our curriculum. We're still budgeting money for curriculum, but we lowered our increase there by $100,000. We looked at some of our textbooks, instructional materials, professional development, and we lowered some of those costs by about $80,000. We took on a little bit more risk in our higher down savings, so when we have a teacher who's retiring at the top salary and we know we're going to replace that person with somebody coming in very on the low end of the salary range, we can assume some savings in our budget, so we were able to bring our budget down by $255,000 there. And then lastly, we looked at all the requests from the principals and the department heads that we had, and we reduced some of their requests down. A lot of these reductions aren't necessarily reductions from the budget, but they're reductions from what we originally had in our request that brought us down by $883,000 to the final increase of 6.7%. This is a little busy, but it's just another way of looking at our budget. So when you look at the top, the base salary increases, when we look at all of our staff, just moving who we have now forward, including all of these steps and the COLAs and all the collective bargaining agreements, that costs $2.3 million, or 3.8% of our total increase. So if we have an increase for next year of 6.7%, 3.8% we would need immediately off the bat just to cover our contractual salary increases. And salaries for the school districts are typically 80 to 82%. It's about 82% of the costs in the school budget are salaries. And next, transportation is a very large cost driver for next year for the school district. We have almost 2 or 3 different types of transportation. One, we have our yellow buses. That service we contract out, and we have a new contract that's starting next year. So we had to go out to bid. That we budgeted about a 20% increase. With inflation these days, typically you see a large increase in that first year of a contract bid. And then in the following years, 2 and 3, you see more modest increases. Additionally, we're adding between 2 and 3 buses next year for the new middle school, because the middle school's all the way on one side of town, and we have to now transport grade 5 to the middle school instead of to various elementary schools. We need to add between 2 and 3 new yellow buses. And the last thing about the transportation is we do in-house, which is an amazing service for special education transportation. It saves the town a lot of money and it's very efficient, but we're finding that we're having a lot of difficulty recruiting drivers. So we really need to aggressively increase our costs for the drivers and the bus monitors. So all told, 1.5% of the 6.7% increase is for transportation. And often that will happen every 2 to 3, 4 years. Transportation will be a big increase, and then it should be more modest increases in the next couple of years. We originally had an increase of 11.6 FTEs for the new middle school. There are other increases, things like tuition, supplies, equipment, that equaled 1.2%. And then at the end, we reduced out the reductions we made, and that's how we ended up at our final increase. We are proposing warrant articles. I know these are going to be discussed on another night. I don't know if we need to go on Thursday night, so we can go through those then. This slide highlights some of the larger federal grants that we do get. We do receive about, I think it's about $8 million in state and federal funding. Some of the larger federal funds, we receive Title I, it pays for some teachers. We receive, these are the large entitlement grants, Title I, Title II, Title III. It explains what they're for. And then the IDEA, which is the largest, it's a special education grant from the federal government. These are all set by Congress. These grants are all federal grants that we receive. And right now, we know that they're still going to be budgeted for next fiscal year, so we're confident in these. They do pay, as I mentioned, for about 27 FTEs out of the grants, and there's about 6 FTEs paid out of the revolving funds.
With the changes with the Department of Education at the federal level, do we expect any impact to that part of the budget?
Always unclear, and we can't guarantee anything. What I will share with you though is that the Department of Education, if it goes anywhere to help human services, they still have to facilitate the grants to the states based on the congressional approval of those grants. So those grants should not change. Now the Congress would have to have a significant number of voters to change the funds. Anything can happen, but right now the way it is, we don't anticipate any changes.
This slide shows how we report to the state. So every year, the school district has to report to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education how our spending shows for the year, and these are the categories that we show. So it's just another way of looking at the school budget. So you can see at the top, it's district-wide leadership and administration. There's an increase of 1 FTE, that's for the Director of Safety, so that's an increase of 10% on that line. The 2,000 area instructional services, that's everything that has to do with a classroom, from a teacher to a supply to the principals. That's obviously the largest part of the school budget. It's almost $50 million. We're increasing 5.6 FTEs there. We're an increase of $2.9 million, 6.1%. The other school services, the 3,000, that includes things like athletics, that includes the transportation, that includes fine arts. It's an increase there mostly due to the transportation, as we described. We're increasing the buses. We have a new contract. We're increasing our salaries for the drivers and the monitors. That's a large increase next year. It's a 17% increase on that particular line. Operations and maintenance of plan, that includes our technology staff. That's what the 7 FTEs are there. So that includes our technology department, and that's an increase of 28,000. We do have a very small line, which we're reducing down to $5,000 for benefits and fixed charges. At this point in time, most of those types of charges are on the town budget, and we were able to reduce this down to $5,000 because we're now using the town compensated absences account. So we really only need to budget a very small amount on that. Community services pays for some behavior surveys. It also pays for some mental health things, small budget line item. And then lastly is the 9,000. That's all of our tuitions that we have to pay when we send students out of district. This line item is offset by a very large, what we call state circuit breaker reimbursement. So we actually budget about $11.9 million in tuitions. It can typically be a very volatile area and it's our largest non-salary expense area. But when we factor in the circuit breaker that we receive from the state, which is about $4.5 million, we only need to budget $6 million. Next year, we're very fortunate that this line's only going up by $70,000. So typically this can be, like I said, a very volatile area when the out-of-district tuition schools increase their rates, which we saw a couple of years ago. Again, it shows our bottom line increase, 6.6 FTEs and 6.7%. And the rest of the slides just go through more detail on each of those specific areas, but you can answer questions if you have them. I don't think we have to go through all the rest of the slides.
Tom McClintock, so I'm brand new at this. At what point do we compare actuals to actuals? Because your budget for 26 versus actual for 24 is almost a 20% increase. That's huge. Versus when do we get numbers for the 25 so we know what we actually spent? So we know what the budget for 26 is compared to the actuals for 25.
So right now the budget for 25 is $61.2 million. We do quarterly reports. So on this Wednesday we'll have our third quarter report. Our quarterly reports this year showed originally we were at about a surplus of 900,000 and then that dropped down to 700 and now we're at 800,000. So we're pretty consistent that we're going to end under that budget of $61.2 million by about 800,000. One thing I should mention, our budget needs to tap, we have a special education stabilization fund. And in order to make the $61.2 million, we needed to use $550,000 from the SPED stabilization. We also need to use $550,000 in '26 from our SPED stabilization in order to make the $65.3 million. But if it comes out like we've been projecting and we have $800,000 surplus at the end of the year, the first thing that we'll do is not use the stabilization, and we'll keep that whole because we want that to be a true reserve. And then lastly, what schools are we're allowed to carry forward circuit breaker funds for up to a year. So typically, whatever is left at the end of the year, we'll keep that in the circuit breaker account and use it in the following year, sort of as another reserve.
I have a question, just curiosity. I noticed like that, where Staples and Ocean State are, and even at the Stop and Shop Home Depot lot, in the mornings, you'll see a school bus at the different lots, but you'll see moms pull up in their vehicles and they're loading kids. Does that have anything to do with our town?
They're private schools.
Probably private schools, then, could be.
It could be private schools, yeah. Some private schools offer their own transportation. They could hire their own yellow bus.
Okay.
That's the next question after that, yeah. Next question.
What are we going to? Next year, we should have I think we're gonna have about 16 yellow school buses in the next contract, and maybe we're increasing it up to 18. One bus that we provide goes to St. Catherine's. So a lot of districts do provide transportation to a private school if it's in the town, and we do that with one of our yellow buses that we pay for, but the transportation goes from all over the town to St. Catherine's. The rest of the buses all go directly to the Norwood schools.
Okay, thank you.
What is the cost per pupil for the school district?
I think it's about 20,000. They just published, the DESE just published the final FY24. So if you take the budget of 65.3 million divided by 3,600 students. Yeah, approximately 3,600 students. Anybody has a calculator?
I'll find that.
Yeah.
Sean, we have a question online.
Okay.
Doris?
Hi, I'm curious, the after-school care program has teachers. Are these teachers, do they fall under the school salaries for their health and salaries, or do they fall under the recreation department?
Thanks. Now those would be under the recreation department because this fiscal year the extended day program moved from the school department to rec. So many of those, it's probably, again, it's like the snow removal, it's probably overtime or additional cost. A lot of those employees may work in the school during the day, but the cost for the extended day portion of it is paid out of that.
The extended day revolving fund.
The extended day.
Not tax dollars, it's on
So
the
it's-
revolving fund.
So it's a revolving fund like school lunch where the revenue that pays, the tuition that's paid for extended day pays for those costs.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So this goes back a while. What was the motivation of the shared expenses where we're taking out of different departments, we're taking expenses and putting them into the town's shared accounts versus showing them?
So this is typical of how most municipalities work. There's always some portion of shared costs. Now, when we report to the Department of Ed, we do report on every dollar spent on the school district. So it wouldn't be just the 65.3 million of our budget, it would be all the grants and revolvings, which totals about $12 million when you add up all those revolving funds and grants and the circuit breaker. And then it would be also all the shared costs.
Right, because DESI has it as 82 billion.
Right, so that would be sort of like the total all in, and we report on that every year, and that's publicly available. We hope to have maybe a page of that in our eventual budget book for the schools. Typically, we'll show something we call an all funds summary that shows everything, not just the operating budget.
Right, so as a town meeting member, and we want to make a vote, when we look at the numbers, we're like, well, it's really not all the expenses, I guess. So how do you make a town meeting member feel better about voting?
I mean, we can highlight that, but as far as our operating budget, that is covering the 577 FTEs. I think we just have to make sure everybody understands there's grants, there's revolvings, and there's also shared costs.
Like the question about how much per student, is it, it's around 20, but it's really more than that, because if you take the shared back over.
That is a good point, yeah. There's a per pupil out of the operating budget, then there's an overall per pupil cost.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
That's good.
I'm just curious, you said it's about 3,600 kids in the whole school system, from kindergarten on up. What percent?
3,575.
I'm sorry?
3,575.
Thank you. What percentage is what you call special needs?
Well, there's different versions of that. So there's special education, and that's about 24%. High needs is about 50.83% right now, and high needs. Oh,
Yeah.
again, I'm not finished. High needs is about 58% or so of our student population, or about 2,093 kids. And that's a combination of students who have disabilities. Those are the students of special ed that you were referring to. Students who are ELL, English language learning needs. Students who have first language that is not English, or students that are economically disadvantaged or low income. So there's a significant shift in obviously the town with some significant needs in the schools. But that also led the state and the governor's budget to allocate about 1.1 million additional money in Chapter 70 funds for this FY26 as well, or an additional 6.8% increase what we had the year prior. So the state's recognizing it as well, I guess, but the special ed rate is about 24%.
So that's close to 60% of the students?
Not the special ed rate. Special ed is about 24% of the 3,575 students. I can actually grab that number for you.
But then there's the kids who are below the poverty line.
There are, yes, there are. Thank you for that. The 58% of high needs is a combination of all of them together. So altogether 2,083 students are considered high need, whether that be EL or special ed, but some of those students could also be both.
Thank you.
Has the state reimbursed for the high school? Has it reimbursed for the migrants? Are they up to date? Are they lagging at all on their payments?
For the shelter, there's students that there's quite a few different reimbursements. So we have been receiving roughly $105 a day for students that are at the shelters. They have reimbursed us up through December. And have you heard they're going to extend that? They're going to extend that. So and I believe that the last shelter here in Norwood is going to be maybe wound down in December of 25. So we do anticipate to continue to get a reimbursement there. We also get reimbursed for school of origin transportation. So that's for homeless transportation. It might not just be at the shelter. It might be if a student went to Norwood schools and they become homeless, they may be living in another town, but we still have to transport them here, and typically we share that with another district. And vice versa, sometimes a student could be homeless living in Norwood, but we need to help share the cost to transport them to another town. There's a lot of that transportation which we get reimbursed for as well.
Is the state up to date on that?
They're up to date. Yeah, some of that is lagged. The transportation, the homeless transportation, we have to report in that report that I was mentioning at the end of the fiscal year, and then they reimburse us for the prior year.
Right.
But they're up to date.
Okay, what about the high school? There was some reimbursements.
You mean the MSBA, like for the building authority? Those are done on a cost reimbursement basis. So as we pay the contractor for the construction, we get reimbursed by the MSBA.
We're talking about the middle school or the high school?
Oh, sorry, middle school.
Well, both,
Yeah.
technically both.
Middle school. High school doesn't have any more MSBA because
No,
the project's, but the middle school is getting reimbursed as the construction's happening.
Just to clarify, multilingual learners are not specifically the migrant families that have been relocated to Norwood for shelter. They also include residents of Norwood that live here, pay taxes here, and whose children are entitled to an equal and fair education.
100%.
Thank you.
100%. Just because you're a migrant student does not make you a special ed student, does not make you an ELE student. You have many migrant students that speak perfectly good English, and they're not special ed, right? So you're getting funds for those students that are here, but many of our students that are high needs are students that are living in Norwood as residents.
Thank you.
So on the 9,000, the programs with other school districts, the increase is 1.2%, so it's 69,000 for, that's the number for next year's. Is that including less the 4 million from the state that's already being counted?
Exactly.
But it's not shown there?
Exactly, so that line item, which is that's when we pay out of district schools. So if a student can't be educated in Norwood, we can send them to a private school. Sometimes it's a collaborative school, sometimes it's another school district that can offer those services. That line item, we actually pay, for next year's budget, we're gonna be paying $11.9 million. It's a very large expense for any school district. But we get that credit back from the state. It's called the circuit breaker reimbursement, and it reimburses districts for high-cost special education placements. A lot of that is out of district tuition, but also sometimes when we have a student that we're spending a lot of money on in district, we can get some reimbursement for that as well. And that reimbursement of roughly $4.5 million brings the $11.9 million down to a budget of $6 million. And as I said, an increase of 70,000. We're very fortunate next year that we have such a small increase, because the budget this year in FY25 is actually more than we need. We're showing a surplus. It's part of that surplus we're projecting, and that's allowing us not to have to increase this line very heavily going into 26. This line item for tuitions often tends to be a large increase for school districts. It's very volatile because even in the last couple of months, we've had maybe 3 or 4 new placements. Students can move in any time in the year, and those can be between $200,000 to $300,000 if it's a residential school placement they have to do. So it can be very volatile. So really, this is a good luck story for next year's budget, that we don't need to increase it by much more than that.
22,000. About 22,000.
The per pupil is 22,000.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
That's it.
Yeah, let's do it. Is there an advertisement for next?
No.
Okay.
All right, so thanks everybody for coming tonight. That's the end of tonight's presentation. Just to advertise, Wednesday night's presentation is going to be Town Meeting 101. Especially for any new town meeting members that might be here, you might want to come and learn the etiquette of town meeting and how it works. And we'll also have Land Use 101 as well, to talk about the 5 or 6 land use articles that we have on the warrant. And we're also going to cover all the special town meeting number 2's articles, which I believe there are 10 of them. There are two special town meetings ahead of our annual town meeting this year. And then just looking forward to Thursday, May 1st, we'll be wrapping up our last information session with special town meeting number 1 articles and talking about the Community Preservation Act articles, and the projects. Other than that, I want to say thank you to all the department staff that came out to support, and thank you to all the town meeting members that are here, and everybody else watching at home. Thank you very much, and NCM too. Have a good night, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.